Hello, BookTube. Well, it's day 4 of the 2016 BookTube-athon, and the challenge today is to read a book by a favorite author. Uh, and I can't help but suspect, from what I've seen on BookTube, that the subtext of this challenge was a book by a favorite author that you haven't yet read. And I must confess, this has always confused me about BookTube. I've seen it many times where someone will hold up author X, Y, or Z, call them their favorite author, and then proceed to talk about the books they haven't read by that author. I've always considered that if someone is a favorite author of yours, it means you've read everything by them many times, that you not only have read everything, but know it, can quote it, can cross-reference it. At least that's the way it's always been for me. So I racked my brains at first, trying to think of a favorite author of mine by whom there is a work I have not yet read, and I couldn't come up with any off the top of my head. So instead I was faced with the challenge of looking through my bookshelves for which favorite author I wanted to talk about. Because I am fine-tuning my personal book collection specifically along those lines, more and more my shelves are filled only with favorite authors and work stuff that comes and goes. So the choice wasn't easy. But I picked an author who is a 20th century novelist that I don't believe gets nearly enough credit for the literary figure that he is. I think he's one of the great novelists of the 20th century, the late 20th century. And yet most of his novels are out of print. He's also a great short story writer and a great teacher. But none of that mattered when it came time for me to pick the book. I naturally picked a work of nonfiction that he wrote. I am referring to John Gardner, who some of you might know as the author of Grendel, a novella told from the point of view of the monster in the poem Beowulf. But the nonfiction work of his that I have in mind is something that I've given to a lot of you in real life and that I've praised to a lot of you in real life, and that's his biography of Chaucer, which he published mainly on the strength of his cachet as a modern writer, and it was well reviewed and it sold indifferently, but it's had a reprint history. And it has since fallen into that small, weird category of you don't know what to do with it books, where an author who's famous for something else exercises their passion by writing about history. And you never quite know what to do with such books, no matter how good they are. Nancy Mitford did one on Frederick the Great. That's wonderful. But you'll never see it referenced as in the bibliography of any biography of Frederick the Great. Never hear it talked about as a great biography of his. Louis Auchincloss did one for Anthony Trollope, and it's delightful, but it's not consulted. I don't know what to make of these things, and this definitely falls in that category. You will never see a scholarly Chaucer biography that even so much as mentions it, and yet there's nothing wrong with its scholarship. It's perfectly thorough, perfectly sound, and also beautifully written. And I wanted to share that peeks out from time to time. You can actually sense throughout the book Gardner sort of reining in his novelist tendencies in order to tell straight history, but it doesn't matter. He can't do it. There's one point he's talking about the betrothal and marriage of Edward III with his wife, a wonderful woman, Queen Philippa. And he talks about how when he took leave of her before their marriage, he kissed her on the cheek, and she cried at the thought of him leaving. Even though she knew she was going to see him again, she still did. And when she is chosen as his most likely bride, the House of Hanel is chosen as his most likely bride. When he was told by peers and bishops immediately after his coronation of the tentative agreement with the family of Hanel, the boy king laughed and said, "I am better pleased to marry there than elsewhere, and rather to Philippa, for she and I accorded excellently well together, and she wept, I know well, when I took leave of her." They were married in York, snow swirling down into the unfinished cathedral, in an age when marriage was not yet expected to go well. Edward and his queen lived a near perfect matrimonial happiness until Philippa's death. And it's that brief image of snow swirling down in an unfinished cathedral that no biographer would think to do. But that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. That moments like that peek through the whole book and are wonderful. But I also wanted to read the end of the book when we get to The Death of Chaucer, because by this point in the writing of the thing, Gardner has given up any pretense of reining in his artistic brilliance and just writes the heck out of the passage. Chaucer's writing, where he wrote to the end, and he's writing in the presence of his assistant Lewis, and Gardner gives us this scene. Still blows me away every time. When he finished, he handed the quill to Lewis. He could see the boy's features clearly now, could see everything clearly, his whole soul in his eyes. Another line out of some old poem, he thought sadly, and then ironically, more sadly yet, farewell my book and my devotion. Then in panic he realized, but only for an instant, that he was dead, falling violently toward Christ. So for my BookTube-athon challenge today, it will be John Gardner. It was just a joy to pull this down and reread it. And it made me want to go back to his novels and short stories, and I will do that in good course. I do all the time anyway. In my unofficial canon of the 20th century, he ranks very high. So if you have a chance to find one of his books, even this one, even if you're not a fan of nonfiction, I say take the gamble. You will love this book. And if it leads you to Chaucer, so much the better. It's exactly what he would have wanted. But anyway, I'll see you next time, BookTube. Thank you.